Hi, everyone. Eric here. You will hear the usual podcast opening in just a moment. This episode is a re-release of our previous episode, number 51. On Friday, June 30th, 2023, our beloved friend, Dr. Rick Miller, passed away. Rick had been ill for a couple of years, and it seemed he was making a comeback. It was delightful to see him at the 2023 Rocky Mountain Psychological Association meeting in Albuquerque. I got to speak with him privately for about 30 minutes, and he was fairly positive about his future. Rick was a leader among leaders. He served as chair of the psychology departments at the University of Nebraska-Kearney and Texas A&M University, Kingsville. He served as president of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology and the Rocky Mountain Psychological Association, and these leadership examples merely scratched the surface of his leadership contributions. He was a prolific researcher and an award-winning teacher on a national level on multiple occasions. I will dearly miss Rick. Our condolences go out to Jeannie and to everyone in Rick's family, and that includes his colleagues and his teaching of psychology friends worldwide. Please enjoy this interview from Psych Sessions with Rick at his best, recorded October 2018 and released January 2019. Hello, and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Eric Landrum, along with Garth Neufeld, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the end stuff. This is episode number 51, where Eric and Garth had the opportunity to interview Rick Miller from Texas A&M Kingsville in Kingsville, Texas. We recorded this interview at STP's annual conference on teaching in October 2018. Our thanks to Jordan Troisi for supporting the podcast at ACT. Now, before you hear the interview, please allow me to share some listening tips and my favorite moments. And please subscribe to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts because that helps us pop in the search results. And while you're there, might as well rate us too. Now, if you know Rick Miller, you know that he's a tour de force. And I'm smiling because as I made my notes to record this, I got to listen to the entire recording again, as I hope that you're about to listen to. And it was just terrific. Rick is a master storyteller, and I think this trait of extroversion has served him well in his entire personal and professional career. He understands the role of history, not only the history of psychology, but the history of the United States and a lot of world history, quite honestly. And he understands those events and how they've affected his grandparents' lives, his parents' lives, and his own life as well. He's just going to tell a story that intertwines everything and makes connections and conversations that he has and trends that he notices. And even the importance of, as you'll see, attending APA conventions when they're held in New Orleans is going to be a recurring theme that you're going to hear about a couple times. I just loved hearing him tell stories, and I probably interrupted him way too many times. But you can just imagine the type of storyteller that Rick is in the classroom. And so we already know that we're going to have a part 2 at some point because we didn't even get the entire origin story from Rick. Now, towards the end, we did interrupt him because we wanted him to capture, a little bit of his incoming activities and plans that he has, because he is the 2019 president of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. So we kind of closed on that. And he talked about a couple of his not only his prior contributions to STP, but also his presidential initiatives. And so it's just a real pleasure to sit down with your dear friends and just have them kind of retell some stories that maybe you've heard in the past, but then also give a little bit more depth and tapestry to some of the things that they've alluded to in their lives. And Rick talked about how when he goes into the classroom, he doesn't use PowerPoint and he doesn't use whiteboards or chalkboards. And if I think about that for myself, I'm thinking, how could you do that? What would you know what to do? What would be your kind of outline as the instructor? And you listen to Rick long enough into this podcast, you'll realize, yep, I think I could see him doing that, and I could see him holding his students' interest the entire amount of time. So please, I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. We are stoked because we are here with the current president-elect, incoming president of the society, Rick Miller.
Thank you.
Thanks for making time for us.
And I'm here too. We're all here together.
Oh, that's right. It's Garth Neufeld. That's right. The originator. No, it's okay to laugh, Rick. It's
okay.
All right. You know, we're not going to be overly formal. It's us, right?
I am interested to start with just the whole president-elect thing and what that means to you, because here we are at the STP Annual Conference for Teaching, and you took the gavel today, and I know that's symbolic. You don't really take the job till January 1st, but
right.
What has it meant, and you can take this wherever you want, to serve in STP and now to be president-elect and soon to be president of STP?
Well, obviously it's an honor. But more than that, it's a chance to sort of hang out with a great group of people. The ST people are the most congenial, compassionate, generous folks that you could ever want to work with. And so being a part of that team has been terrific. And I'm glad there's a president-elect year in which you sort of begin to learn the ground rules and how things operate. And of course, Sue is an amazing mentor. Without even trying, it's just all there. And so that's been really helpful.
And that's very generous of you to say, Rick. But at the same time, you're not a stranger to leadership positions in your lifetime, either as a department chair or as part of the Rocky Mountain Psychological Association. So this, I believe in the vernacular, this is not your first rodeo.
No, it's not. I was a big fan of Robin Hood, and so I had this little gang of merry men, except that there were half girls and half boys in my little gang in the neighborhood. And so growing up, I think I had leadership positions, if you will, from about the age of 10 or 11.
Well, since we're there, tell us about that. Do you mind? I mean,
No,
so
not at
where
all.
did you grow up?
I grew up in West University Place, which is an incorporated little village in the middle of Houston, Texas. Has its own school, has its own police and fire department, and it's right there.
What an interesting name for it's a neighborhood?
Because it's west of Rice University.
Okay.
So that's why it's West University Place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it was the kind of place where we never locked our car. We never locked our house. I was raised by grandparents, and in 1960, they had decided they were going to go to Europe. Grand tour, 19 days. One of those, if it's Tuesday, you must be in Belgium kind of tours. Right. And I can remember my grandmother saying to my grandfather, we're going to be gone most of the summer. Do you know where the key to the house is? My grandfather says, no, I haven't seen it in years. Oh, well, don't worry about it. And off they went.
And they took you with them.
And 14-year-old me got to go to Europe. And talk about just lovely people. My grandparents were such terrific. At the end of the tour of your little 19-day thing, you have a week somewhere, and you can pick. And they said, Ricky, where would you like to spend that week? And I said, well, I'd really like to go to the Scottish Highlands because I've been reading all these books, about the clans. And they said, that's what we'll do.
As a 14-year-old, you're reading about the Scottish Highlands?
Oh, yeah.
That's what stuck out to you?
Yeah. Well, I've got a bunch. I want to circle back, but right now, it's recency effect.
I was like, the grandparents would take him wherever he wants to go.
Well,
that's amazing.
And we really can't edit this out, but may I ask you why you were raised by your grandparents? If it's too personal, we can go back and edit this.
So my mom and dad got divorced about a month before I was born.
Okay.
They were both kids, 16, 17. Neither set of parents really approved of this marriage, but they were insistent. And they were married for about 11, 12 months, about a year, and then that was it. And then my mother died in a terrible accident.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And so I was raised by my grandparents.
And that makes perfectly good sense in context.
So these were my maternal grandparents.
Gotcha.
And it sounds like they were pretty amazing people.
Well, my grandfather had come over from the old country. He was Hungarian. And he left Hungary in 1910. Took a ship in Fiume, which was a Hungarian free port, which is now part of Italy, actually. Comes down through the Straits of Messina and up to Naples. This is Halley's Comet in the sky. Vesuvius is erupting. The Neapolitans think it is the end of the world, right? Second coming of Christ. They're panicked. They've also trying to get away from the volcano, so they have charged the docks. So my grandfather never was able to get off the boat because there were millions of people milling around in Naples. Then he called at Gibraltar, went through Ellis Island, gets to Ellis Island. He's been told by his older sister has come over first and then brought the two younger kids over. And he was 18 at the time. He closes up the cafe and comes over. He's the last to come. She's already picked out his name. There was somebody by the name of Fred that was big on Broadway at the time. His name was going to be Fred, right? Not Ishtok, but Fred. So he gets to Ellis Island, right? He's Fred, right? He's walking through the line, and he notices that people are being stopped, asked a question. Some of them shake their heads yes, some shake no. Those that shake their head no go through. Those that shake their head yes get sequestered on the side. To the day he died, he never knew what the question was, but he knew which way to shake his head.
Oh my goodness.
Were you ever able to determine the question?
Never.
So what was his name before leaving Hungary?
Ishtok.
What was the first name and last name?
Mueller.
Sorry. And what was his name after he comes to the United States?
Fred Miller.
Fred Miller.
Is Ishtok Isaac by chance?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah, he was Jewish.
Yeah.
In the old country. Didn't have a lot of really positive experiences and memories of that. So when he got to the new world, he thought, I can leave that behind, which he did.
And they ended up in Houston.
They ended up in Houston. Well, so he gets to New York. He speaks Hungarian. He speaks German. He speaks Yiddish. He doesn't speak any English.
Wait, time out. And so how does he learn three languages?
I'm going to tell, well, that's where he's born. He's born in Hungary,
Okay.
but of German ancestry.
Okay.
And then Yiddish is just part of the culture.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for
okay.
interrupting. It's like I'm in class.
So he gets a job at a German bakery as a delivery boy. In those days, a woman would come in, select all their groceries, go back home. The delivery boy would bring it. And those brownstones, there was a dumbwaiter. You just hauled it up. And so the owner of the grocery store says to Dad, look, lots of times they forget. You haul stuff up and they think, oh, I forgot the butter. So they're gonna want you to go back. And since you're not going to know what they're going to say, I'm going to teach you this phrase. Write it on a piece of paper. Right? So when they yell down at you, say, just write it on a piece of paper, bring the paper back to me, and I'll send you back with whatever they forgot. First day on the job, hauls it up. The lady says, haul it up further. I can't reach it. And he says, write it on a piece of paper. So he lost that job. He ends up joining the Army Corps of Engineers, and he's shipped down to Galveston to help rebuild after that terrible hurricane, and that's how he gets to Texas. And he meets my grandmother, who is the daughter of a Baptist minister.
Uh-oh.
And right, the Baptist minister had died in 1912, and so this was a little later than that. And on his deathbed, he says to his wife, we have 6 children. Promise me that every one of them will get a college education. Well, she had very little money. But what she did do is she went to what is now Texas State University. It was a normal school. She becomes, they buy a house, which is now was a boarding house for college girls. It's actually been turned down and turned into a dormitory now, still on the same site. Mm-hmm. And she did catering at the school, along with her half-sister. And so that's how she got all of those kids through, except for one son who got this great job out of high school in a bank. And the day comes when Sally walks into the bank and says, young man, you're not going to make a liar out of me. You quit this job today and enroll in college. And he did. She was tough.
But I'm guessing that deathbed declaration by your great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother, yes.
Was the start of the reason why you went to college. Would that be fair to say?
It would be fair to say. There was another huge influence on me, and that was my junior high school music teacher, Daniel Bristow. And he was a graduate of Juilliard, violin and piano. He got a PhD in music from Columbia Teachers College, and he was teaching junior high. And I once asked him, when I was a little bit older, why do you teach junior high? And he said, for me, I think it's the last opportunity that I have to make a real impact on people's lives.
Wow. What did you play?
Viola.
Do you still play at all?
A little bit. Christmas carols, easy stuff.
Yeah, my daughter played the viola.
Really?
Yeah, as a junior high into high school, and I think she likes to play around a little bit, but I think she's given it up pretty much. Yeah, it's a beautiful instrument.
I'm hearing like all these stories of your parents, grandparents, and their families, and I'm wondering, do you feel like you came from a family that was good at telling their stories to each other?
Absolutely. My grandfather in particular. But the other thing is, living with grandparents, so all the family albums, that's where they're kept. I could sit down with my grandmother and she would go through these pictures and tell me stories about them. He was just a great storyteller without the pictures. But also it meant that on holidays, where did the rest of the family come? Our house. Mm-hmm. So I had lots of these cousins, you see, and that were just fun to play with. And
so you said your parents were super young, so that probably meant that your grandparents were probably reasonably aged,
right?
For parents.
When they took on this kid, they were pushing 60.
So the year. So when you're born at age 0, how old are your grandmother and grandfather?
So I'm born in 1945, and they were born in like 1892. Somebody do the math.
So that's 45. They're 53.
They're 53 years old when they take on this infant.
So that's older than the. Yeah. You don't normally have kids at 53.
No.
Okay.
So
the reason it was many years later when I thought, wow, that's a heck of a responsibility to take on at that
53.
age.
Yeah, but that's a labor of love, though. Their daughter had died.
Not at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, not
at that point.
Okay.
So I asked about the storytelling because I know you love history, and
Indeed.
I wonder. Sometimes I look at those threads, and I wonder, sitting around with those albums and looking back over family, if that puts I don't know if there's some value of the past that you have and where that comes from. Just in talking with you, I know that you love history of psychology.
I do.
You love storytelling. I've sat around with you and you tell a great story. And so it's neat to put this together as to who you are and where you came from and what kind of stories were being told when you were a kid and throughout your life. So I don't know if you put any of that together. And I imagine that your classroom is probably a storytelling classroom.
Indeed it is. Yes, it's a very interactive kind of classroom. I don't do PowerPoint. And I do very little on the chalkboard. But mostly we kind of talk it through. We do demonstrations, we do exercises, we do discussions, and I tell stories that I think illustrate the points I want to make, and then try to make sure that I've made it clear that that's the point I wanted to make, so they don't just remember the story. But I would say, in terms of collecting stories, I've done, 300 and some odd undergraduate research projects. And the way I do undergraduate research is basically to say to the student, what are you curious about? You want to know why that jerk of a boyfriend dropped you? Well, we call that unrequited love, and there's a theory, we've got literature on that, and we could do a research study on it. You want to know whatever you want to know. And so at this point, in my social psychology class, there is not a topic in that textbook that I haven't had some student do research on.
Awesome.
Which means that when I talk about it, I can say a person just like you who was sitting at that little desk over there 4 years ago did this and found this.
I think if I'm recalling it, Steve Davis and Randy Smith wrote a research methods textbook where they wrapped student presentations at regional conferences into their book as examples of the major topics in psychology, just like you do
Indeed.
in that social psych class. But Rick, I want to come back to, because I'm fascinated by this thread of, so you're a musician. So in high school, so it wasn't, if you're going to college, you were going to go to college.
Actually not.
Okay.
It was interesting. So my grandparents had raised 4 kids before me. One went to college and went to A&M, member of the Corps. This was as World War II was breaking out. And so if you were a sophomore, you got commissioned either as a first or second lieutenant, depending on who's tossing the dice. And he went into aviation. And he did not make it through the war. On that huge bombing run on the Ploesti oil fields in Bulgaria, right? He was a fighter escort and he got shot down.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a year before I was born. Their other son had spent the entire war in the Pacific, in New Guinea, in the Philippines, ultimately in Japan. Yeah, and while he was out there, he got commissioned. They had OCS in Australia, but he never got home that whole time. And he came home like 2 months after I was born. So I think there were other things on their mind as I was growing up,
right,
other than college. But my music teacher was probably instrumental in saying, you need to do some applications, right? You can't just go. You have to, right? Because my parents really weren't thinking along those lines. And so, right. So I filled out the applications late, applied to a number of Midwestern schools who had already filled their classes.
And what year is that? Will you help me?
So, yeah, absolutely. 1965.
1965.
Right. Weber State had a rolling admissions process. I thought, I've traveled through there and camped in that area. It's really pretty. And so for no better reason than it's just gorgeous in that area, I applied to Weber State. I have never regretted that decision. The quality of education, the relationships with teachers was so terrific. You were definitely not a number at Weber State. My first psychology teacher, his name is Gary Carson. He and I are still close. Right. I whenever we have the RMPA in Utah, he and I visit, and along with his wife. They're of course in their 80s at this point, but that's a relationship that's lasted all of these years.
Did you start as a psych major when you started at Weber?
So once again, my music teacher said, "Look, as a violist, you're not going to be Carnegie Hall."
I think that's called radical candor.
And said, but what and he knew me well. He says, based on what I know, I think psychology is where you ought to go.
Really?
He did.
Did he pluck that out of the air? Had you guys had conversations
We had
about it?
we had conversations all the time. I mean, I spent lots of hours at his house along with other members of the orchestra, just jamming and doing this, that, and the other, talking.
May I ask how old he was? At the time you were 18.
At the time I'm or 16, 17, he's in his late 30s.
Don't let me overanalyze this or impinge what I'm thinking. It's in some ways, maybe it sounds like he's a surrogate father in that he was a little bit younger. He's really looking out for you. He's thinking about what you want and pushing you to kind of do that thing that maybe fallen off your radar screen. I mean, sounds like he was in the right place at the right time for you in your life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think you're exactly right in terms of a surrogate father. By the time my grandfather took it on, if somebody was going to play ball in the backyard with me, it would have been my grandmother, not my grandfather. He had his own business, which was upholstery and furniture refishing and all that. Worked hard.
Yeah.
When he came home, he was tired.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's not a criticism of your grandfather.
No, not for me either. But I would say yes, probably he was a surrogate father because there are things that we talked about that I would never have talked to my grandfather about.
Yeah. It's important to have those people in our lives. And I was struck when you a few minutes ago said that your parents, grandparents, had things going on in their lives, trauma. And I think I see this in our students quite a lot, right? Where their families maybe can't give them, either they have other things to worry about. Let's face it, education's important. It is not the most important thing when you're trying to survive.
Sure.
Or when you're trying to deal with traumas. And so, it's a good reminder. I was listening to you say this about your family and thinking to myself, we do need to remember this about students, that there is an amount of privilege in not needing to worry about anything else except your education.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you go to Weber. I'm guessing you're working your way through. You're paying your own way. You've got 3 jobs.
So my grandmother had saved up for me by hiding the money in a chest of drawers. Wow. $1,000, which went pretty far in those days. But I did work study. And I also got a job with there's an IRS office in Ogden, Utah. They hire students to come work. So I worked from 4:30 till midnight for the IRS, and then I had work study during the day. And and I did that for the first year and a half, and then I think again, Dr. Carson, my professor, said, "Do you not have a scholarship?" And I said, no, I didn't think out-of-state students qualified for scholarships. He said, hang on a second. We can do something about this. And so then I had some relief from that.
So when we were in Ogden, when we were at Weber State last year,
yes,
you were back at your old stomping ground.
I was indeed.
Oh,
and I got to see, and I went to see Gary Carson and his wife, Sue, and during that time as well. It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
Although the campus had changed dramatically.
I bet.
Right.
Is it fair to say you were first gen? Am I getting that right? You're a first gen?
No. So my grandmother, so because of my great-grandmother's, the kids will go to college, she got a teaching degree at Texas State Normal in history and English.
Okay.
So, and did some time as a teacher. And that's where my grandfather met her. He was in the Army. They had been stationed in the area. A friend said, you don't go to church, do you? And my dad said, nah. And he said, well, why don't you come to church with me? And he said, really? And he said, yeah, come to church with me. It'll be fun because we have a picnic afterwards and there are girls there. And my dad said, okay, yeah, girls there. Okay. You sold me on that deal. And that's where he met my mom. Yeah.
Very good. And so you do psychology at Weber State and
and sociology, dual major, and anthropology minor.
That does not surprise me. That does not a double major with a minor.
And a minor.
Yeah. In 4 years?
No, 3. So in those days, if you took at the point you're taking 15 hours, which is a full load, right? Weber didn't charge you any more for taking more. So you could take 18, 19, 20 hours and pay for 15. And so since I didn't have a whole lot of money, I did it in 3 years plus the 2 intermediate summers. I was done.
Where did you learn that?
What?
To take advantage of that kind of a situation. Did it just make sense to you, or did you see it modeled?
See, my grandparents came through the Depression. And they did fine. They actually bought a house during that time. They did fine, but they were very, very careful. And so I learned to be careful. I can remember by the time I came along, they were fine. And I can remember my dad saying, we had a bay house down at Galveston Bay. Would you think, what do you think about having a horse? You could have a pony and we could keep it down. And I said, we go down there every once a month. That's a lot of money. I don't think I need that. And so, I was brought up kind of being careful and frugal.
Yeah, well, you said you were born in 1945.
Yeah.
So that's the very last year of the war.
Right.
And so they're going to be incredibly frugal, recovering from World War II.
Yeah, so first the Depression and then the war, and they were growing vegetables, victory gardens, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
All that rationing. And so, so just kind of part of the atmosphere.
Yeah,
really.
but Garth's on to something there in that you saw an opportunity, you valued it, you optimized it, things were afforded to you. And I think that's a theme that I know you well enough. I think I can say that has carried you through your entire professional career. You have not satisficed your way through psychology.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Eric's going to tell you, I'm going to stop Eric right now. He's going to say, please take a compliment. And I don't know
where's the real Rick Miller? Did he fall and hit his head? I mean, this is the humble and with high humility Rick Miller. Okay, we'll get the real Rick Miller in here eventually.
What'd you do after Weber? What'd you do after Weber State?
So the day came when our Congress, in its intimate wisdom, decided that they would no longer provide graduate students with deferments. Now, they're going to change their mind in about 6 months and realize that was not a good move, but that's when I graduated. And so I got a notice from my draft board in Texas saying, you've got a few weeks to volunteer for the service, or you're in the Army now.
What was your number?
No, this was before numbers.
Okay.
There was no out.
Oh,
There was no out because there were no deferments for graduate students, and I graduated. So a buddy of mine, his dad was a master sergeant in the Air Force, and Hill Air Force Base is close to Weber. So we drove down to take the test. Well, and the buddy of mine has got like a 3.8 average, right? Like the number 2 student in the entire department. He didn't pass the Air Force exam. There's like a whole battery of exams, and he never found out. We never found out. So I said, well, I don't want to go in the Air Force if you're not going in the Air Force. So we lost another week thinking, well, what are we going to do? And then he came and said, hey, look, I just found out that the Navy will fly us to San Francisco, pay for all of this. We take the battery of tests there at Oakland Naval Air Station, and maybe we can be like pilots for the Navy. And I said, cool, that sounds great. And that's what we did. And we both got in.
So when you get this letter, does your stomach drop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. This is a war that I am just adamantly opposed to. I mean, I have no use for. I'm really angry. I'm an anti-war person at this stage. And so the idea that I've got to go in is not a happy idea. I'm not the least bit keen. And in fact, what's going to happen is I go in being trained as a pilot, blah, 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 blah. But the day comes, well, what happens is President Johnson declares a unilateral ceasefire to try to do peace negotiations. The North Vietnamese move up all of these missile emplacements at that time. So when we start bombing again, our planes, the Navy ones, are getting shot down left and right. And the Navy decides, whoa, let's give this mission to the Air Force because they can fly around through Laos and come in through the back door, and the Vietnamese had not closed that door. So suddenly, the word comes down for all of us junior officers, if you're not going to make a career of the Navy, we can arrange for you to be honorably discharged so that we don't need you. And so the idea was, we were told, the rumor comes down, as it does in the military, you need to go and say, I would like a transfer to the fleet. I'm through with training, all this training for a pilot, transfer to the fleet, right? And so about a third of my class or more came in. And I come into my commanding officer. I said, yeah, I'm here to request a transfer to the fleet. And he said, oh, God, you're the 5th one today. And he said, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to recommend you to go to Washington to teach leadership at the War College. And I thought, thank you, sir. That's exactly what I was hoping for. What are you going to say?
Gets you home.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, the Bureau of Personnel said, we don't want any young person who has not actually served a tour of duty in Vietnam to be teaching leadership. And I thought, oh, they are so wise, so wise. So in 3 weeks, I was out. And at the same time, what had happened is my wife's grandfather had died. We'd flown up to Iowa for the funeral and memorial service. I stopped off on the way back in Chicago. We flew through Chicago and went to Northwestern. And I said, are there any opportunities to come and doctoral program, because I'll be out of the Navy between now and January? And Tom Cook said to me, well, as it happens, we admitted 4 students this year. One of them just just turned us down and decided to go to Johns Hopkins. So we were getting ready to go back to our alternative list. Talk to me.
So I don't, I'm sorry, I've already interrupted the flow. I was going to ask if I could interrupt the flow. So first off, do you have the GI Bill coming back?
I do. I will have. Yeah, I will have the GI Bill.
And then when you say Tom Cook, do you mean Thomas Cook of Cook and Campbell, or is that a different?
No, that Tom.
So Cook and Campbell.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah. Campbell was one of my teachers as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
this is very.
Philip Brickman.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Awesome.
So what happened is, and I tell this story sometimes. Tom says to me, "Do you know your GRE scores?" I said, "Yes." Good. You know your GPA? Yes. Good. He said, "Ever done any research?" Remember, this is 1970.
Right.
I said, "Yeah, I've done 2 studies." And so I told him about, and one of them was a study of conformity. And I said, I'd gotten this idea that leadership is not leadership anymore. It's a matter of figuring out what people want to hear and telling them that. And so I think if we set up a conformity experiment like ASH, leaders are going to conform a whole lot more than scholars. And that's what I had done. I had done that in a high school. We had done the conformity experiment. We took all the elected student body presidents, all those people. We took a bunch of people that were 4.0 kids, right? And we found that that's exactly what. And this is what I think got me into Northwestern. Tom Cook says to me, "How do you explain that?" And I said, and nobody had ever asked me that anyway, but I said, I think what happens is scholars have been reinforced by being the only person in the room that got the right answer, of not conforming to the rest who got the wrong answer. And he said, "Can you be here in January? And I can arrange a full fellowship." So I thought, cool.
So this is just stopping off.
Yes. When students ask me about how do you apply through the whole, I say, I can't talk to you about that from personal experience. I can tell you what I've read, because I didn't.
Just stopping off. So what if you had stopped at University of Illinois, Chicago? You might have gone there.
I wouldn't have. Northwestern was my go-to school.
Well, it's an awesome school. It's an amazing school.
It was an interdisciplinary. Remember, I told you before, right? Psych, social, and anthropology. Mm-hmm. The social psychology program that Don Campbell was running was interdisciplinary. You could take anthropology, sociology, or psychology courses in any number. So that was where I wanted to go.
Do you get your PhD at Northwestern?
Oh, yeah.
So you get your master's and PhD there?
Both of them. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask this question very carefully. So what's the designed amount of time for someone starting with their bachelor's degree in hand to earn their PhD in the program you enrolled in? Is it a 4-year program? Get your master's along the way, earning your PhD?
Yes.
And how long did it take you to get your master's and PhD at Northwestern University?
Why is he looking so sheepish?
Because I have nailed his behind.
Okay, fine. A little less than 4.
Okay, all right. A little less is not
But the thing is, Northwestern was really good about moving people through the program, because the money, the grant that funded all of us, was a grant to the department, not to individuals. So no individual had a vested interest of keeping you around another year or 2.
I understand that.
We would look over at Wisconsin and say, "You poor suckers," because they were averaging 6.
That's right. So what's the actual answer? Less than 4?
Yeah, because I don't know it.
Well, so I started in January.
I don't know it either. I'm just surmising it.
January.
No. You know. How long did it take
70.
you?
So I started in January 70, and then I got the job at Georgetown.
What, January 71?
No, 70. No. What is it? September of 73 or 4. I don't remember. It's been a little while.
But you accelerated through the program.
Yes, but I didn't get. But I went ABD right to Georgetown. So I didn't actually have my PhD in hand, because my committee by this time is scattered to the 4 winds. Tom Cook is at the London School of Economics for a year. Wortman is not right. So I ended up doing 3 defenses. One of them in an airport.
So is Campbell also at Northwestern at that time?
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah,
Cook and Campbell are on your dissertation committee?
No, they're on my master's committee.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Cook and Campbell are on your master's committee. Oh my God.
And my master's ultimately gets published in JPSB.
Oh, of course it did.
Because I had such a good advisor. Phil Brickman was the third member.
That's not a name I recognize. I'm sorry. So I'm not in social. Not in social.
And his is a terrifically sad story.
Oh, okay. So first job. So I'm cognizant of the time because we might talk about STP at some point.
I knew he was a great storyteller. But
I knew that fun. Too. Yeah. And I don't mean to brag, but I've known Rick longer than you have. All right. So it's not a competition. So first job with your so you just said it. You went ABD to
went to Georgetown. Yeah, I had two job offers. Carnegie Mellon and Georgetown came in the same day, and Pittsburgh, Washington D.C. Yeah,
okay.
Part of it was that.
Sure.
And then also the other social psychologist at Georgetown was Jerry Soules.
Yep. All right, I recognize that name.
We became great friends, still are friends. And we did a book together. So, I mean, we would just, it just really clicked for me. And his areas of social did not overlap with my areas of social. We'd been doing very different kinds of things. So it was great to bring all that together. So, yeah, Georgetown and I was there a year and a half.
Okay. And
that was it.
Georgetown to Nebraska?
No,
Kearney.
Georgetown to Europe.
Ew.
So most of the big changes in my life have happened at APA when it's been in New Orleans. It's weird. This is the first one. I'm down there. I meet a fellow from my church. And I said, I didn't know you were coming down to he said, yeah, I'm down here doing like a job hunt. You wouldn't happen to be interested in going to Heidelberg for a year, would you? And I said, well.
Jawohl.
Well, at the time I said, well, probably not. But when I got back to Georgetown later, the department chair, whose name I won't mention, but is a total jerk, had decided to fire Jerry Soules. And I had written a letter in support of Jerry Soules, so I was not very popular. And so he wanted to fire me as well. And we went to the dean together, and the dean said to him, you can't fire two of them, pick one. Pick one. And Jerry had been there a year longer than me, so Jerry went.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you were going to.
No, I know. But then I called back up my friend from the church. I said, is that position in Heidelberg still open? Because I think I might want to get the hell out of here. And he said, as it happens, we are now finalists for the position. It was a contract. And we lost one of our two people. Come talk to us.
The best part of the story is that I think you screwed the dean, right? And both of you left?
Well, I guess that's true in a way.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, we both left. So Jerry goes off to SUNY Albany. Not a bad school, and I went to Heidelberg. And then so they gave me a leave of absence to do that, and then we had a new chair, which was great. But he wrote me, and we extended my leave of absence another 6 months, and then he finally wrote me and said, "Look, we're holding this position. You need to either come back and teach for us, or let us go, so we can find somebody who will come back and teach for us." And I said, "Let it go." And I stayed 10 years in Heidelberg doing research and development kinds of stuff, and teaching part-time at the University of Cologne, which is really fun. I had met the guy who translated Zimbardo's textbook into German, worked for Springer Verlag, and also had a seat, or whatever you call it, in Cologne at the university there. He had a
like an endowed chair or something?
Yeah, it was an endowed chair kind of thing. And he said, I want you to come up on Friday and teach a seminar, Friday afternoon, Saturday morning. I said, that'd be great. So I rode the train up the Rhine. I would teach the seminar, right? Then I would spend the night with he and his family, and then I would come back the next day. And that was fun. But mostly I was doing research and development, environmental psychology stuff, and organizational behavior kind of stuff for 10 years. So I was there for 10 years.
So, but that's not a place where you're going to earn promotion with tenure. I mean, you're just as a visiting professor.
Oh, yeah. I'm just an adjunct. Yeah, doing a class. Now, after that, we're going to end up in Mallorca, Spain for 5 years.
So is there along the way a wife and a child somewhere in the story? We don't have to really go there, but I mean, if you're bouncing around the world, that's an added level.
So Jeannie, who you've met.
Yes.
And we
adore.
We met during the time in Heidelberg.
Okay.
Right? And the job is kind of winding down. We've had 3 contracts. And I had a team of about 20 working on various projects.
Wow.
And so that was winding down, and we had bought.
So I'm sorry, you're not teaching.
No,
You're not a university professor in Heidelberg.
No, I'm a director of a research group.
Okay, gotcha.
Not teaching at all.
Gotcha. All right.
So we're at the end. We're doing write-ups of various things, so we can be anywhere. And we've bought a sailboat in England back when the dollar and the pound were almost 1 to 1. And we'd been sailing around. We're going through the French canals, right? And we get through the French canals, and and we figure, well, we've got a couple of things we need to do. We need to find a place to leave the boat, either go back to Heidelberg and renew another contract, or let's go home. But most important, for that year, we had been homeschooling Nathan, my son. And we thought we needed that was 8th grade, and that's fine. But high school, you need peers, and so we thought, well, we got to figure this out. And so toward the end of August, we sail into Mallorca, into Sóller, and I go ashore as I always do to check things out. And I'm surprised to see on a newsstand that there is a daily English language newspaper on this Spanish island. I thought, that's weird. I didn't know anything about Mallorca at the time. I open it up, and there's an advertisement for the American School of Mallorca, kindergarten through 12th grade. And on the opposite page, a brand new marina opening up that is 1 block from the American School of Mallorca. And the little hairs on the back of my head went up. Somebody's trying to tell me something. And they were. So we decided, what the heck? And we put Nathan into school. We became really good friends with some teachers there, one of whom inherited one of the private schools on the island. So we ended up doing 2 things. One, we created what the English call a college of further education and what we would call a community college. So we took over the school buildings at 4:30 and had them for the rest of the evening. We taught computers and we taught cooking and we taught Mallorcan history and all kinds of stuff. And so we looked around and we said, for the English-speaking community here, which was 25,000 in Mallorca, there's nothing but bars and discos. There's nothing, educational. There's a need. Mm-hmm. So it worked. And then the other day came when my friend Barry, who owned the school, said, we were having dinner, and he said, one of the 8th grade teacher had come to him and said, we need a summer program. Some of these parents really need something to do in the summer. And I said, well, how many kids is she thinking? And he said, 8. And I said, oh, Barry, come on, 8. I said, listen, I'll do a summer program, split the proceeds between your school and my community college, and I guarantee you 40. We had 90 the first year. And I've been doing that now for 31 years as of last summer. So we run this day camp. Sometimes I take students over with us to do cross-cultural research at the day camp. We've got 14 different nationalities, Russian, Spanish, right? This whole range, about 250 kids that come to the day camp. It's the month of July. That's why I'm never around in the summer. That's what we do for the month of July for all these years.
I know. I can read the handwriting on the wall that we don't usually do 2-parters, but Rick will be one of the easy return guests, and I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm going to skip Kearney to Texas A&M Kingsville because I know that's part of the chronology. But I want to because this will probably be released, I'm guessing right around January. So I'm going to interrupt the flow, and I apologize for that.
Fine.
Because I really want to make sure that listeners of this, again, right around January, get to hear about your SDP agenda and what you're thinking about for your presidential term. And I promise we will have you back on again to finish the rest of the story.
Gladly, yeah.
Because you're such a good storyteller. I know parts of that story, and Garth may know bits and pieces of that story, but I want to make sure that in a timely manner in January that folks get to hear about what you're thinking about for SDP.
That's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just want to reflect on your story is so engaging. Like, I am just captivated by listening to the adventures of your life. And they started,
Thanks.
I'm just going to tie this up because they started in Scotland. They started in Europe and then a trip to Scotland. And then, I mean, the war and all kinds of things, and it brings you to Spain. And now I know that you go back there every summer. I know the backstory. It's unbelievable. I can't wait to hear what's in between. So yeah, let's jump into STP President-elect.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for
course.
thank you for putting up with me bouncing around. But there is a reason.
I will say the way I got back into this country, APA in New Orleans.
That's a cliffhanger right there. That's a cliffhanger.
That is what we're going to start part 2 with him. I will start with that line when we edit.
Was it a dark and stormy night by any chance?
Suddenly a shot rang out.
Oh, there we go. We're going to play that game. I love it.
So you've got the gavel. You got the gavel.
I've got the gavel.
What does 2019 look like for STP?
So I outlined in the meeting today 7 initiatives. Let's see if I can remember them.
Oh, this isn't a memory test, but go for it, man. Go for it.
But the things I would really like to accomplish during the year. And one of them is to broaden our outreach. The people that we serve are often regional universities and some liberal arts colleges. There are 2 groups that I want to pay particular attention to. High school teachers is one of them. We've got a core of really dedicated high school teachers. I was so impressed when I went to the summit in Ogden that summer. I mean, it was just some amazing people that I had not known. And so I was blown away by that. But I thought, look, sure, TOPS, they're doing all the good stuff. The AP Reader people, they're doing all that. But what about the thousands more that are out there that they have no idea what we could provide for them? So I'm working on a task force that will find a way, working through the state boards of education, to get our information out of what we could offer, particularly to those people who suddenly get assigned, you're going to teach psychology, but I'm a history guy. But yeah, you're going to teach psychology. Yeah. So that's one underrepresented group. I've talked to Kristen and to others in that leadership core to work together. I think, this is a team effort. The other underrepresented group is R1s, the research intensive. They have no clue. And yet we've got some things that could really serve them well. So I'm going to kick that off because I've been invited to do a presentation at COGDOP. And so that's the Council of Right Graduate Programs. And of those 70 people that were there last year when I went for the first time, 50 of them are R1s. I've been invited to do a talk on what could STP do for you.
Awesome.
And so and I'm going to start off with saying, okay, you hiring any new people? You think they might want to have some help figuring out a syllabus? We've got a project for that. You guys going through any academic program reviews? We've got a system. We can help you on that. So it's really about what we can do to make your job easier. So that's one of the initiatives, is to broaden that. That'll include a member survey. I talked with Jane Hallinan and Regan about this at lunch the other day, and we were talking about having every month a mail out going out to as many places as we can think of. Here's a thing, just a thing that we could do for you, rather than all the things. When you get inundated, with a brochure that says, here's 40 things at this institution. Yeah, well, I'm not interested in those. But we know when APRs typically get arranged. We can hit them with that.
Right.
Departmental Consulting Services. We know when new faculty are showing up, right? We can hit them with, here's what project syllabi. So that's what I'm thinking, is that these would go out monthly. That would be one way. But that's the idea, just to broaden our reach. Not really so much to get new members, although that'll be a side effect, but to get those resources out to people that can really use them. So that's one of the initiatives.
All right, awesome. And so let's see, how do we wrap this up? Would you mind talking, Rick, just a little bit about your history within STP and all the contributions you've made leading up to this point in time? Because this is not your first dance.
Well, I've done some things for sure. I think the first thing I did was on the Fellows Committee.
Okay.
And it was a time in which Bill Buskus was really kind of leading the charge to see, if you're Division II, that's an APA fellow. But what about APS? And he really wanted to expand that. And I was a member of APS. And so I thought, I can in fact work on getting that to happen. And then now it does. So I was pleased about that job. And then I also worked on the awards committee, for a little while. I did the DCS consulting for several years. And that was good fun, really. I mean, I've got a list. The only thing that I did on that is that we had certain regions, like the Rocky Mountain, that had almost no consultants. Lots of Eastern. But the way I wanted to do consulting is I'd like to make the expenses minimal so that we're not sending people from Boston out to L.A. to do an academic program review. We need a better representation. So that was my goal. And we ended up being able to do some of that. And then of course the ebook editor thing. We published a whole bunch of them during my time.
Yes, you did.
Very pleased about. And we've, and I'm hoping to do a couple more during my term. Not me, but I'm hoping to encourage people to do a couple more during
I was
my term.
impressed after the high school summit that you were able to pull together that the ebook last year.
Well,
and that was a huge project.
And it only would have happened. It only happened because of people like yourself. I mean, as you recall, you did that one whole section, all right? If I hadn't had people doing each of those sections, it wouldn't have happened. But I did. I had these incredible, many of them high school teachers, but also college level people that are just interested. You know
what I liked about that is it gave me a chance to work with high school folks and put stuff together. And then I think it's huge for all of us. But I loved working. I too, like you, didn't have much exposure to working with high school folks until, for me, the AP reading, and then, but then the high school summit was. I mean, it's very eye opening. We're all working towards the same thing.
Yeah. And so many very talented folks. But I'm very proud of that ebook. I think it can make a huge difference.
What was it called again?
So it was psychological science. It was a compendium of lab exercises, and it was based on the principle, Garth, you'll remember, that we articulated at the summit, and that is psychology is a science. But one reason it's not thought of that way is what defines a science in high school is a lab.
That's right.
So why don't, and we do exercises, as you know, that could easily be turned into labs. And that was our goal. We have a lab for every section of the introductory psychology textbook that Myers wrote. That's the one I was using, to make that decision. But again, right. So you can do, and again, we have anywhere between 3 and 6 lab exercises for every topic area. You can choose. But you can do labs. And the ultimate goal, which I don't know if we'll ever realize, but the ultimate goal was to say to high schools, let that psychology class count either as a social science or as a natural science, depending on what the student needs.
I really appreciate that you can see something that needs to be done, and then you're kind of bullish, you go for it. You go hard at it. I remember you standing up at many meetings and saying, this is what we're doing and we need people. And you do a really great job of that.
Thank you.
And it was inspiring, I think, and that's why a lot of people signed up.
And I was so pleased about the timeline, because I did have people saying to me, oh, wait, we shouldn't be doing this. We haven't finished the work of the summit, and that's going to take at least another year. And I had this long conversation with those folks and said, no, we want, people have gotten this done. We want it out there to help this generation, not the next generation. So
there's a momentum piece, I think, that if you don't strike while the iron is hot, after a conference, after a summit, then you lose momentum. I think part of APA Snap that happened, and that it took so long to get the website up, even though it looks great now. People are expecting it in March, then it's pushed to May, then it's pushed to June. I think good for you for pressing on and saying, no, we're not going to wait for everything to be perfect. We're gonna press on now and strike while we've got some momentum.
It's funny because you're like that, Eric. Actually, with projects that you're on, I've been on task force where you're chairing them, and you push through. And I wonder if it's a mark of a leader that is valued in the STP community, maybe broader than that as well, but I think you've often said that to start to serve an STP, you do what's asked of you. You volunteer, you do what's asked of you, you do it on time. And that gets you all kinds of places.
That's a pretty simple formula, I think.
Not a bad one.
That a lot of people, for whatever reason, struggle with. You're asked to do something, you do it on time, you do it well, and you'll be asked to do it again. That will not be forgotten.
Right.
Somebody's going to notice.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many moving pieces. Today's business meeting, for example, you see all these amazing officers get up and talk about all the moving pieces of the society, and and the call for this and the call for that, and there's plenty of places to get involved. And then when you do that well, then you're gonna be remembered. And if you don't do it well, you're going to be remembered.
Fair enough.
And so we have an amazing tribe, and I just think that I think the cream rises to the top. So
it's amazing, and it's so congenial. People that get things done, but they do it in a way that makes everybody feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a generosity of spirit.
Yeah.
I've talked about this before, and not that it matters. I wonder if teachers of biology are like this. I wonder if teachers of geoscience are like this. Is it being a teacher of a subject, or is it teachers of psychology or extra special? Not that matters. It's just an item of curiosity to me.
Or is it a model of leadership that just gets passed down? Because when you start with a guy like Bill McKeechee, or you start,
right.
and I look at Ken Keith called his table today the table of geezers. But when I looked around,
it was the AARP Recruitment Center. When
I looked around that table, I just thought they're not only amazing scholars and leaders, they're great people,
right?
And I think that's the tradition. And
I would guess that in many fields, the group of faculty that are truly interested in teaching, right, whatever discipline it is, I bet they're just like us. Because as we know, not all psychologists are just like us.
That's true. That's fair.
And this from the social psychologist. I trust him.
Well,
now you need to be really careful with trusting social psychologists.
Now,
Did somebody say deception?
I think we should end on "In Rick We Trust."
Oh, there we go.
I think should that be the motto for 2019? So I want to give a shout out again to Jordan Troisi, and as the director of programming for ACT and STP here, and it's been a great day for STP on day one of this conference. And Rick, I know you took time away from the social hour and the poster session, and on behalf of Psych Sessions, we are thrilled that you made time for us today.
I thank you very much for having me. This has been great fun.
Yeah, and you're one of these people that when Garth and I talk to each other, it's like, we got to get Rick. When are we going to get Rick?
Yeah.
You've been on our list for a long time in a good way.
And we're really looking forward to 2019. So good luck on your presidential year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.